All right, so today I wanted to weigh in on the whole gold versus Bitcoin, Bitcoin versus gold debate. And the first thing that I would acknowledge for starters is that I don't think either one of them is bad by any means. I mean, I'm going to get right into it. I think Bitcoin is the clear winner. And that doesn't mean I'm not necessarily a fan of gold. Personally, I think maybe 10, 20% of your whatever you would be allocating towards gold and Bitcoin should be allocated towards gold and silver, probably a little bit in silver, in my opinion. I'd say maybe, I don't know, 10% gold, 15%, or sorry, 5% silver, 85 Bitcoin. That's probably roughly what I would say, um, roughly. But for the simple reason is very, very simple. Gold has not done what it's intended to do, right? And it has failed, right? And this doesn't necessarily make it horrible, the worst thing in the world, because people will strawman me and try and say that. Gold, the whole point of it is decentralization and purchasing power outside of the money system, right? And to a degree, a hedge against inflation. But again, when people bring up all this other noise, all this other garbage, the main goal by far, the close second is, it's not that close, but it's moderately close, is a hedge against inflation. There's no close third. The third is often a different universe. That's how far away it is. By far, the most important thing is purchasing power outside of the system, right? A hedge against the banking system is a good way of putting it. And again, honestly, I don't think either one of them is that much better than the other one when it comes to that. But here's the catch. Gold has not performed because, again, gold has been around for thousands of years, but yet we still have fiat money, we still have central banking, and it's worse than ever, right? So if gold was the solution, Bitcoin wouldn't even been necessary, right? But here it is, right? Here it is. It had at one point over $1 trillion market cap, right? So the whole debate in my mind comes down to the fact that gold is failed, right? It has failed. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean Bitcoin has succeeded, far from it at this point, but it is our best hope, right? Because again, if gold was the solution, it would have performed by now. And again, the one area where I think that someone like Ron Paul gets wrong is that these people are big on a gold standard, right? The problem with the gold standard is the gold needs to be centralized, not all of it, but a lot of it needs to be centralized in banks. What's the problem with that? Well, if you have a state, inevitably you get a corrupt government and they get rid of said gold standard, right? So gold standard will never work assuming you have a state. But if you don't have a state, there's no need for the gold standard in the first place because we wouldn't have fiat money. So um, I think the people who bring that up, they're not as well thought out as they think. But again, the other thing too when it comes to gold is that let's say you have an SHTF situation. This is the one thing people talk. Well, gold's better than Bitcoin because if the internet goes out. But it's like, well, number one, um, what happens when Starlink things come online, which they already are to a degree. So I think the days of the power going out and us having no internet are they're probably not going to be around for very much longer, right? I mean, that in a lot of places they already are not an issue, right? So that's something to bring up there. But even if that is the case, let's say you have a full-on SHTF situation, like, would you rather have an ounce of gold or a month's supply of food or water? Virtually everyone's going to take that water or food, right? Even though an ounce of gold is worth significantly more than a month's supply of food, at least at this point, right? Same goes for Bitcoin, to be fair. But that's something that the gold bugs bring up as a big advantage over Bitcoin, and when in reality, Bitcoin or gold is far from ideal in that situation. So, and here's the other thing too, like getting back to my original point, it being a hedge against central banking and the modern financial system, well, Bitcoin actually is a finite supply. Gold is not, right? Gold is not a finite supply. Now, again, it is more finite than fiat money. It's not going up nearly as much as fiat money, but It's not ideal. Bitcoin is far superior in that way. And in a modern world, it is also way easier to use, especially with the Lightning Network coming online and only going to get better over time, right? So, like I say, I'm not saying gold is super inferior, but it definitely is inferior, especially as time goes on. Like, what technological advancement is gold is going to massively benefit gold versus Bitcoin, right? As technology gets more advanced, it's only going to benefit Bitcoin. So in my mind, like there's no, like, let's say gold's better in some ways, but as an aggregate, it doesn't even come close, right? It doesn't even come close. Simply because Bitcoin is our best option, simply because gold has failed, right? Gold failed, and there's really no denying that, right? And again, I'm going to say, oh, they wouldn't have went off the gold standard, but like I said, when you have a state, it's inevitable that they're going to become corrupt and want to be able to buy votes and print out massive amounts of money, which you can't do on a gold standard to get elected. But again, they'd say, "Oh, what if we didn't have a state?" But it's like, like I said, if we didn't have a state, we probably wouldn't even need Bitcoin or gold, to be quite honest, because we would have sound money by default. Because if there was no way to buy votes, then we would have sound money by default, right? So if there was no Fed, we probably would have sound money by default. So basically, none of the arguments really make sense in my mind, right? And like I say, Bitcoin is truly decentralized. So I mean, look at gold in the past. How did it work out? If gold was your preferable way of hedging yourself against the system, it hasn't worked out in the past. I mean, look at how it worked out in the 20s and 30s when the gold was taken. Look at how it worked out in um, I mean, if you look back at the time of the gold standard coming off, right? It worked good in the 70s, right? It actually was a pretty good hedge against inflation. But I mean, let's go back. Like, we have the highest amount of inflation over the last couple of years in 40 years. And I actually looked prior to doing this because I wanted to know, if you go back March of 2020, right when the government started printing out massive amounts of money, again, not literally, but you know what I mean, if you know what I'm talking about. Um, Gold is up 7%. Bitcoin is up roughly 300, right? Bitcoin was about 8,500 Canadian right when the government announced the initial lockdowns to the day. Now it's about 26,000, right? So we're talking more than 3x. So again, Bitcoin has performed significantly better, right? It's obviously more volatile, right? Obviously, it's going to be more volatile. But again, Bitcoin better in almost every way. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have neither of each, right? Neither of each. But what I am saying is that it's done a lot better, right? And again, the other thing people say, oh, well, Bitcoin it's a surveillance coin. This is something you hear a lot in the libertarian / ANCAP community, but it's like there's already private ways of doing it, right? I mean, if you download a Lightning wallet, you don't need KYC for that, right? And again, if you want to bring $1 million worth of gold over the border, how's that going to work out, right? How's that going to work out? If you want to send someone $1 million worth of gold, or even 10,000, you're taking quite a bit of risk, right? If you want to drive across town with $100,000 or even $10,000, right? Right? I mean, no one know if you're going to do that with cash, it's pretty risky, right? It's pretty risky. So again, Bitcoin is far superior in that way as well, right? So again, I'm not saying gold is not, you should have none of it, but what I am saying is that if we actually want to win actually want to have the best hedge against central banking and against the system, Bitcoin is that, and it's really our only hope, right? It really is the only hope at this point, right? Gold has failed. Bitcoin's the only hope. So again, that's my opinion on the topic. Again, would love to hear other people's. So like I say, throw those comments down and stay tuned for more.